Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Tyler German again. Kind of an extension video to our first video we did last week for the college basketball season preview, where we touched on a bunch of big picture teams, talked about some of the teams we're expecting to go to the Final Four, some of the key guys to watch it in the sport this year, upperclassmen, underclassmen. Today, we're going to, recording this on Wednesday, we're going to touch on some games that are happening on Thursday and Friday this week. So a few teams that we haven't really talked on that much, but some teams I think that are worthwhile kind of keeping an eye out for going forward this season. And also some of the first big games on the college basketball calendar, as this week has been kind of the beginning of the week. We've seen a lot of bye games, people playing some easy wins, but Thursday and Friday, we got a few good games to look out for and potentially learn some more stuff about these teams. So we're here to kind of give you a little bit of insight of what to watch for in these games coming up. But welcome back to the show, Tyler, and how are we?
Doing good, man. Thanks. It was a good first 2-3 days here. Saw some good games, some interesting games, and ready to keep this thing going. Yeah,
so I guess to tie it into that, we're recording this on Wednesday, so right before the games are kind of starting tonight. I guess from the first two nights, is there a major takeaway you have that you kind of want to touch on yet from one of the teams that you were able to watch?
Yeah, for me, it was I'm sure most people were watching. It was the Michigan State JMU game. Michigan State, the number 4 ranked team in the country, dropping to James Madison 79-76 in overtime on Monday night. It was a really good game from what I watched. JMU played outstanding. They had a big man. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he came from Boston College, and he kind of showed to me that, being in the ACC for a few years before coming over to a mid-major school, he wasn't too big for the time there, and they got the big win. So I give them credit. But for Michigan State, man, to me it was the shooting, going one for 29 from 3. I don't anticipate that to be something that happens often. It just kind of JMU got them on the right night, and they found a system that worked, and they were able to stick to it throughout the game, and got the win there. But I expect Tom Izzo to kind of bounce back later this week and prove that was just kind of a fluke game. I don't anticipate this being something that happens often. But I was really impressed by JMU, and it was a little bit of a concern to see such a poor performance, although it was opening night for Michigan State.
Yeah, and a Michigan State team, too, that is supposed to be, guard heavy, dominated by their guards, like you said, only shooting 1 of 29 from three-point range is certainly something to raise an eyebrow at, but they still only lost that game by 3 shooting that poorly. I think in the long run they're going to be fine, but just might be one of those teams that gets off to a bit of a slower start. A team that I paid a close attention to on opening night was the team that's actually projected to finish ahead of them in the Big Ten. We talked about them a bunch last week.
Yep.
So we'll keep it kind of quick, but Purdue just seemed like they were out for revenge that game. I know they were playing Samford, not exactly a very intimidating opponent, but the guards looked better. They just looked more mature and grown up as a team. Zach Edey somehow looked bigger. I know he was so big last year, but he looks like he might have even got taller or added some more muscle. He just, as always, was a force out there on the floor. And I think that this is just going to be a team that is looking to steamroll people each and every night. They know what they let slip away from them last year, had a golden opportunity to potentially go to the Final Four, win a national championship, and they lose to FDU in the first round. I mean, just such a disappointing way to end such a great season last year. And I think that they're going to have kind of that lasting memory on their mind all year. And I think each and every opportunity they get, they're going to be a team that tries to just completely roll you and doesn't take anyone lightly. So I'm intrigued to see kind of going forward once they start to play some better teams, what they look like. But they did impress me on Monday night. And I think the guards looked more mature, and that's kind of what we've been looking for throughout this all season.
Yeah, just kind of bouncing off quick of what you said. I think, I touched on it a lot last week. It was just the outside shooting for me. That was my big question mark was were they going to have guys that were going to be able to step up and hit outside shots? They did it in the first game. If they keep that up, they're going to prove to be that number 3 seed that people expect. But they looked really good on Monday night.
And then another team that played on Monday night that stuck out to me as well, and we talked about them during our preview last week, was Villanova. I mean, I think in their win over American, I believe the final score was 90-63. The big thing with them this year, I think, is the veterans on this team and the depth on this team, and they showed that in both parts. They played 9 guys, double-digit minutes. They had 5 of those guys scoring double figures. I think this team can be really good. Justin Moore is a veteran guard. Eric Dixon is going to be one of the best big men in the Big East, maybe the best big men in the Big East. And they just have a bunch of versatile guards and wings that are going to be able to make shots from the outside, guard multiple spots, rebound the ball, and a bunch of them are just physically like grown men out there. I mean, Tyler Burton, he looked like a really physically imposing player last week. Mark Armstrong, a young guard who's only a sophomore now, he looks like he's ready to step up and have a big role. I'm really excited to see this Villanova team progress, and I think that they have a chance to be really good. And I was kind of high on them throughout this all season, so I'm glad that they kind of reassured me with that on Monday night. Obviously, they're going to play some more talented teams coming up ahead, but I don't think this is a team that's going to be afraid of any moment. They have guys that have kind of been there and seen it all.
Yeah, they looked good, and kind of like you said with some of those older veterans, you kind of expect a little bit of a faster start, even though they have some new pieces coming together. But that's just coming with experience. So I wasn't too surprised to see them get out early and kind of show that experience, and the depth is going to be, I think, the biggest factor. Teams that are deep and can play multiple guys and have multiple rotations of guys, those are the ones that usually are able to wear teams down late in the season, and they kind of look like a team that should be able to do that coming down the stretch in February and March. And then the last team for me was actually in last night's game was Baylor. We touched on them, or I touched on them a little bit, I think, in the previous show, but there was a lot of question marks with them just because they had so much turnover, losing a lot of their key scorers, and they looked like it early on. But they found their rhythm. I would say about 5 minutes into the second half, you could really see them starting to move the ball much better. They weren't turning the ball over, and they started to pick up their defense a little bit. That some of that could be towards the coaching, obviously, playing a role there. But one thing that I really was impressed with was Jacoby Walter, the freshman. Even in a 40-minute span, you could see him start to grow up. He was the reason that they won the game last night, hitting a lot of late shots, going 4 for 7 from behind the arc. And I think he's going to end up being the reason that they play better than people might have expected them to. And I think he's gonna surprise some people this season.
Yeah, that was a fun game to watch too. Like we said kind of at the beginning, there hasn't been that many high-profile games. I mean, Kansas State, USC was pretty good. I mean, Georgia, Oregon, 2 teams that are kind of expected to fight for a tournament spot, but they haven't really had that many good matchups yet early in the season. We're going to talk about a couple or a few good ones that are going to be at the tail end of this week, but that was a nice matchup, a high-scoring game, and it felt like that was just a game between 2 future NCAA tournament teams, like potentially like a 6 or a 5 versus a 4 in the tournament, something like that, where it's like a second round game. And those teams both showed that they can play. I mean, I think both coaches are kind of leaving that game thinking, all right, we might have to clean some stuff up on the defensive end with an 88-82 game, but we got guys that know who can score, and we're going to be better because of having these early type games in the season. So those are some, I guess, takeaways from the first few nights. Now we're going to transition we're not going to go into some really in-depth preview. We just have a couple matchups we want to highlight, and their teams will probably be covering a bunch of this season. But me and Tyler each took a team from 5 of these matchups or 6 of these matchups, I believe. So we're just going to kind of go over them and kind of give our big picture thoughts on the team, what to kind of expect going into this game if you're able to tune into it, and who we think is going to come out on top in the matchup. The first one is actually Thursday night, one of the mid-major games of the year, with New Mexico playing at number 23 St. Mary's, a 10 o'clock tip on ESPN+. I'll go into it first with this one. I kind of went into the New Mexico side. They were a fun team to watch last year, a team that I watched a bunch of like late-night hoops games for. They got off to a hot start. I think that they were the last undefeated team in the country at like 12-0 or 14-0 or something, but kind of sputtered down the stretch, didn't make the NCAA tournament, but really good offensive duo in Jamal Mashburn Jr. and Jalen House. And this is a team that can score the ball. Those 2 guys combined to average 36 points per game. And they scored 80.9 points per game as a team. That was number 1 in the Mountain West and number 12 in the entire country. So This is a big-time offense that returns their two best pieces. The defense struggled, though. They allowed 74.3 points per game, which was 288th in the country and 11th in the conference. But I think when you look at a team that's wants to get up and down, score a lot of points, you're going to have to sacrifice some stuff on the defensive end just because of that tempo. So that can skew the numbers a little bit. But this is a huge game, I think, between two mid-major squads. I figure St. Mary's is most likely going to be a tournament team. But I do expect New Mexico to kind of be in that picture, maybe in the bubble talk, maybe find their way to like a 9, 10, 11, 12 seed, somewhere in that range throughout the year. But if they're able to go on the road here and get this win, it would be a huge start to their season.
Yeah, we'll see how they do. And kind of like what you were saying, as fun as New Mexico State is to watch, St. Mary's is kind of the complete opposite of that direction. For those that do stay up and watch the late night games, they'll put you to sleep sometimes with how slow paced their offense can be. But the part, if you're a true basketball fan, that's fun to watch is their efficient scoring and the way that they play defense. Last year they held people to 60 points per game or less, which is that's really efficient defense there. And the other night on Monday night, they held their opponent to 28 points in 40 minutes. I mean, it's a Division II school, but I mean, even still, it's hard to hold a team to 28 points. That's really hard to do. So it's hard to get a judgment off of how they played truly. But from what I did watch of them, Aiden Mahaney looked really good, scoring 15 points in the opener. So my biggest take on it is if New Mexico is able to speed them up and get them playing out of their traditional pace, we could see them in a tight one on Thursday. But to be honest with you, I just don't really see that happening. I feel like no matter what team St. Mary's plays, they find a way to somehow slow the game down. So I got St. Mary's taking this one on tomorrow night.
Yeah, so this is a game where Haslam Metrics, an analytic website that I tend to look at when previewing a lot of these games, they have St. Mary's projected to win this one 73-68, so like a 4.5 point spread, I think there. I could see New Mexico covering that, but I think St. Mary's finds a way to win this game at the end of the day as well. I think they're going to be competing with Gonzaga, as always, for that WCC crown, but it's an experienced team too, and I'm intrigued to get a closer look at them tomorrow night. Second game that we're going to cover, we go to Friday now. We only have Friday games for the rest of this because obviously college football is still in full swing. So I think it is a pretty smart, marketing ploy to get people's eyes to go to college basketball on this Friday night while college football is still going on. But we got a bunch of good ones and probably the best game that we're going to be looking forward to the rest of this week in college basketball. Number 12, Arizona, traveling to Cameron Indoor to play number 2, Duke, a 7 o'clock tip on ESPN2. Graham, you want to kind of go into what you're looking for from Duke, not just this game, but big picture-wise as well?
Yeah, so, I mean, they're coming off of a big win against Dartmouth, and I didn't watch the full game just because it got so out of hand, but watching the first half, they look exactly like the type of team that we thought they were. They're going to bring it inside and play that inside-out play style. Kyle Filipowski scored 25 points in the opener, and they were limiting people to one shot. Once again this year, just like last year, ranking top 5 in total rebounding. Freshman Jared McCain, he looked good. He wasn't gaudy by any means, but he didn't have that typical like deer in the headlights type of look that you may get with a freshman. We'll see how he does against this Arizona group. Obviously, it's a little bit different when you're going 2 against 12 rather than the 7th ranked pick in the Ivy League. So, but they looked good. Like I said, some of the young guys looked good, but the experience was, to me, what I thought helps kind of carry them. And another thing they're going to lean on with Jeremy Roach, Ryan Young, and Ryan Blake's coming off the bench. They're going to lean on those guys to kind of keep the team in pace. But we'll see how they do. Obviously, with Arizona coming in, 12-ranked team, and Caleb Love with some vengeance here, coming from the ACC over to the Pac-12, coming back into Cameron. He's got that kind of knowledge that maybe some of these other Pac-12 guys don't have. So we'll see what they look like. I think it's going to be a really good game and a really fun one to watch on Friday night.
Yeah, as we said, with all the college football stuff still going on, I feel like this game's getting swept under the rug, but this is one of, if not the best non-conference game on the schedule early in the season for college hoops. I mean,
sure.
two teams that are definitely capable of going to the Final Four. As you touched on, a dominant performance a dominant performance by both of these teams with Duke over Dartmouth and then Arizona over Morgan State. Arizona scored 122 on them, and that's in a 40-minute college basketball game. This isn't an NBA game, so pretty insane just to see that number. But I think we're not really expecting much from Morgan State this year, but I think it shows that Arizona is still going to be one of the more potent offenses in college basketball this year. Averaged 81.9 points per game last season. That was first in the Pac-12 and sixth best in the country. As you touched on, Caleb Love coming over from UNC. He's going to be counted on to be kind of the main scoring option in the backcourt. Kylan Boswell had a pretty nice year one. He's looking to have a bigger year two for Arizona. And then they also got Alabama transfer Jaden Bradley. He's going to be another backcourt weapon. And then Omar Ballo is one of the best bigs in college basketball. He's like a classic low post guy. He's going to block shots and really be a force around the hoop. So I'm intrigued to see what he does down low against Filipowski and what some of these guards do against each other. Should be an awesome game. And as we touched on, I wouldn't be surprised to see these two teams potentially meet up down the line in the Final Four. So Arizona is a team I'm really high on, though. I picked them to go to the Final Four this year. Just the thing to watch with them, can they improve on defense from last year? They were upset by Princeton in the first round, the NCAA tournament. They kind of got exposed on that end of the floor with some three-point shooting. So if Arizona's offense isn't clicking, if they're not hitting shots at the high rate, can they win a defensive game? I think that's going to be something to watch for, not just in this game, but going forward. But it's going to be a good test. Haslam metrics in this one. Let's see what they project. I assume Duke winning. Yeah, so they have Duke 78, Arizona 74. So probably like a 3.5 point spread in this one. I think we could expect. I do think Duke's going to win at home. I say it all the time, but I think in college football, college basketball, home court and home field matters the most. So I do think Duke's going to win this game, but it should be one of the best games, not just in college basketball this week, but all sports. I think it's going to be a really fun watch for Friday.
Yeah, I have Duke winning this game too. I think it's going to be really close. Obviously, just like you said, the main reason is Cameron Indoor. It's really hard to win there, and sometimes that can just tip the measuring stick. Even if teams are deadlocked, even in terms of statistics, players, whatever, sometimes that home court just matters a little bit more, and so that's why I took Duke in this game.
All right, we now transition to the SEC and the Big Ten, where we have number 15 Texas A&M playing at Ohio State, coming off a down year, 7 o'clock on Peacock. I'll go into A&M a little bit. They're a team that I'm looking at this year to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament and potentially even win the SEC. They're my pick in our picks last week to win the conference. Wade Taylor IV, a chance, I think, to be a first-team All-American and SEC Player of the Year at the guard spot for the Aggies. This Texas A&M team returns 4 starters, and I'm a huge fan of Buzz Williams. He's entering his 5th year at Texas A&M. In his 5th year at Marquette, he took them to the Elite Eight, and in his 5th year at Virginia Tech, he took them to a 26-9 record and the Sweet 16. So it seems like year 5, he really knows how to get things rolling at these stops. I think this is the breakthrough year for Texas A&M, and this is a huge chance for them to pick up a quality non-conference road win in this spot. Last year, they got talked down on and kind of shit on just because of the lack of non-conference games they played. This is a pretty good test against an Ohio State team that is expected to be kind of competing for a tournament spot this year.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State is a team that normally when you look at them, you'd think that they're usually right in there in the Big Ten mix and they're going to get, one of the middle spots in the tournament. But they are, like you touched on, coming off of a struggling year last year, going 16-19. So they're looking to right the ship, and I think this is a perfect game for them to attempt to do that. Coming in with the Texas A&M squad ranked 15th in the country, and you get them at home. They did lose some of their guys from last season, those being mainly Bryce Sensabaugh, who was their leading scorer last year. But what they did get was a guy who was on the team last year but starting to come into a new role, Bruce Thornton. From what I understand, what I've read, he's looking to be their leader, and he kind of showed that in their win on Monday night, beating Oakland 79 to 76, I believe, or 73, excuse me, scoring 17 points in that game. But overall, I didn't think they looked that great. They showed flashes, but they do have a top 10 recruiting class, and I think it's just going to take time to develop such young guys, which may key into the factor of why they only had the 6-point win against such a mid-major school. So we'll see. I think it could be a close one early on, but I think I'm not sure exactly what the spread's going to be. But I think Texas A&M kind of pulls away and gets the road dub in Columbus.
Yeah, so this is actually deadlocked. Like the projection shows decimals. It has Texas A&M 70.54, Ohio State 78.50. So this one just might be just a straight pick 'em on the books. But I also have Texas A&M getting this win. As we touched on, they're a team I'm really high on this season. So I do expect them to find a way to win this game at Ohio State. All right, another game that I'm looking forward to. Two teams that play pretty similar styles historically. Number 9, Tennessee at Wisconsin at 9 o'clock tip off on Peacock. I'm expecting this to be a matchup that features a low scoring game. Tennessee, the past few years, I always think of them as more like a football team. They just have like a bunch of physical athletes, but not the most polished basketball players. And then we know Wisconsin as well likes to slow it down. I just think Tennessee is better at this game and more equipped to beat someone at their own style of play than Wisconsin is. I think they're just more athletic and they're going to be able to push these guys around a little bit more. Vols are the favorite, though, to win the SEC this year. A big picture talk with Vescovi and Ziegler back. There is buzz that this could be, Rick Barnes' best team at Tennessee, potentially make that deep tournament run that many have been expecting from them the past few years. They really struggled shooting the ball last year, though. Tennessee ranked below the national average in 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage. So this is a team that needs to figure out some better ways on offense in terms of shooting the ball. But the defense was great. They held opponents to 57.9 points per game, which was first in the SEC and third in the nation. So a very strong defense, but a poor offense. They're counting on 2 mid-major transfers to help out them in the shooting department this year from USC Upstate. And I believe the other one was from like Northern Colorado. So 2 guys that haven't played at this level. Let's see if they're able to step it up. But expect kind of similar Tennessee team as the past, especially with Vescovi and Ziegler back, though that experience is really going to help them this year.
Yeah, you touched on it right away. I think it's going to be a one possession game when you look at the card when it's all said and done. The biggest thing for me is that Wisconsin's returning every contributing player from last year's season that went, a 20-15 season finishing 11th in the Big Ten. I feel like 20-15 overall is actually not too bad of a record when you look at it. It was just so happened that the Big Ten was such a strong conference last year. This team headlined by 6'2" guard Chucky Hepburn. He scored 20 points in the opening night. And so when you talk about a team, especially that's kind of looking to right the ship a little bit after having like an okay season, I feel like we'd be talking a little bit differently. I was looking back at their schedule from last year, and they played a lot of notable games that were really close. A few of those being Michigan State. They had a loss by 4, lost by 1 to Purdue, lost by 1 to Kansas. So a few of those games, if they tip the other way, we're looking at a 24-25 win team that makes the tournament, and they bring every single one of those guys back from that season. So I think I think we could possibly see an upset on Friday night. They were able to beat Marquette last year as well, and we know how good that they ended up being. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring affair, and it's a very even matchup. And kind of like what we talked about with Duke, with Cameron Indoor, I think the home team just kind of gets that edge in such an even matchup. So I'm actually going with the upset. I'm not exactly sure what the spread is looking like on your site there, but I like Wisconsin to take this one.
Yeah, projection here is actually 66-65 Tennessee. So like you were saying with the home court advantage there as well, sounds like the books are going to be expecting this one to keep it close. I do think Tennessee is going to win. I just think they're better at this game than Wisconsin is in terms of playing a lower score and physical style. I think that they're going to have their way a little bit more in the end. But Wisconsin, as you're saying, they look pretty impressive the other night. But that's what the beauty of these early season games are. And the same thing with, like, I guess you can kind of tie it to college football. Like, college football, you have no room for error at the beginning of the year. Like, these teams, Tennessee and Wisconsin, the winner of this game is not going to dictate the rest of their season. Like, they're going to have so many opportunities in the SEC, in the Big Ten to play quality teams. But this is just kind of a good game to just add another resume win to your belt. Or if you lose, just kind of find out what you are as a team at this part of the season and what you need to improve on going forward. So, all right, we got 2 more games left. We'll hit these ones quickly. We have Yale at number 11, Gonzaga, 9 o'clock on ESPN+. Don't know exactly if be tuning into this one, but intrigued to see what Yale brings to the table because Yale's picked to win the Ivy League this year. And I want to see how they stack up against some major competition, because last year, Ivy League tournament champion Princeton was able to beat Arizona in the 2-15 game. Then they took down Missouri before falling in the Sweet 16 to Creighton, who they gave a pretty good fight to as well. So can this Yale team look the part? Can they make some noise this year in March? I think this game is going to kind of tell us. I mean, obviously, there's so many more games to be played in the season, but this is going to tell us, is this team legit? Do they have the pieces to win the Ivy League and potentially go make some noise in March? They're returning 4 starters who averaged double figures last year. They're an older group. They're an experienced team. I don't think they're going to be afraid of this moment, especially playing Gonzaga too. I know they're a very well-respected basketball program, but it's not like you're playing Duke or North Carolina. Like the name on the chest of Gonzaga, I think is not that intimidating to this older group of Yale players. So I want to see how they stack up against the Zags, and I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts are on Gonzaga heading into this one.
Yeah, so I mean, Gonzaga's in a weird spot. We touched on it just a little bit last week, but they're having a lot of turnover. For the first time in a while, obviously they don't have Drew Timme anymore. He was there for, I think it was 6 years. So when you lose a guy like that changes a lot for your team. And they really only returned two guys who didn't really play a whole lot last year. But they do bring in transfers, Ryan Nemhard from Creighton and Graham Ike from Missouri. So they do get a few pieces who should be able to come in and play right away. But I do think Gonzaga wins this game, but I think it's a good spot, like you said, for an older team like Yale to kind of pounce early and kind of make it known for them, just because Gonzaga's in kind of a vulnerable spot that they haven't normally been in recent memory. So I'm intrigued to see this game as well, just because of how much is going on with that Gonzaga group.
Yeah, the projections for this one looking like 80-67 Gonzaga winning this game. So Yale probably like a 12.5-point dog. I think it might, if that's the actual spread, I think I might actually take Yale. I think maybe even the first half I might look at the spread for that one, just because, as you were saying, I think this is a team that is not going to be afraid of the moment, and they're going to be ready to play from the start. So, all right, final game that we're looking at, I have Gonzaga winning that game as well. But final game that we're looking at this week for college basketball opening week, and then we got a bunch of good games early next week, including the Champions Classic. We have Memphis at Mizzou. Both these teams unranked to start the year, but both these teams were NCAA tournament teams last year. 9 o'clock tip-off on the SEC Network on Friday night. Houston out of the conference now in the American. Memphis should be competing at the top with newly added Florida Atlantic for this year's American crown. No reason not to be right up there at the 1 and 2 for those two squads. It's a good matchup, though, for them against a Missouri team that won a game in the NCAA tournament last year, and then, as we touched on, actually lost to Princeton in the round of 32. But Memphis added two good transfers in the portal with Javon Quinterly and David Jones that are going to help in the backcourt, and then they added Jordan Brown from Louisiana Lafayette in the front court. Memphis ended the last year strong. They won 14 of their last 18 games, but they had a very good scoring offense. That's where they were one of the better teams in the country, 79.4 points per game. They ranked 21st, but as we talked about with New Mexico too, sometimes when you have a really good scoring offense, you're going to have a poor defense. 71.8 points per game they allowed, which was 234th in the country. I do think there's a lot of pressure on Penny Hardaway, though, this year. And with the American Conference losing, UCF, who has been up and down the past few years, but Cincinnati has been pretty solid, and then you lose Houston, you're losing some opportunities to play some more quality teams. So Memphis has to take care of these non-conference games if they want to find a way back to the tournament and get some quality wins. And I think Missouri is going to be a team that's competing for an NCAA tournament berth as well. So I am looking for Memphis to show up and show out in this one. And I am actually going to pick Memphis to win this game. I think it's kind of a statement game that they're going to be the team to reckon with FAU this year in the American. And that would be a big time statement doing it at an SEC school like Missouri.
Yeah, I think this is going to be another, obviously, like all of the ones we've talked about, are going to be some really good games to watch. Just on the Missouri side of things, Dennis Gates did a great job after year one. He turned a team that had 12 wins in 2021 to 25 in his first year, and making it, like you said, through round one in the NCAA tournament. So it is a good Missouri team. They do bring back some key role players, no true superstar guys, but they do bring back Aiden Shaw and Sean East II. But most of their work actually came in through the transfer portal, getting guys like Caleb Grill, averaged 9.2 points per game at a pretty good Iowa State team last year. Jesus Calero Martin, who is a big athletic, like swing four, I guess you could call him, had 7.2 points per game at Campbell. And then probably the most notable name that most people probably remember is Connor Vanover from Oral Roberts, the big 7-foot four-man who was pairing up with Max Asmus. He averaged 12.7 last year, and he was a Defensive Player of the Year. So I expect Missouri to be a good team. They're going to be their traditional selves, play good defense, kind of be a little bit better offensively scoring than like the true defensive units like we talk about with Tennessee, Arkansas, schools like that. But I think it's a spot where I also have Memphis winning this game. I think it's just going to be too many role players trying to find new spots. I think that's usually one of like the type of biggest problems when you don't have that star players who's going to come into their own, and that just takes time to determine. So I think it's a game where Memphis can kind of jump out on them early, and like you said, Penny Hardaway is in a pressure spot, so I think he scheduled this game for a reason. He's going to have his guys ready to play.
Yeah, so we both got Memphis actually winning there. That would be an upset. The projections have Missouri winning this game actually at 80-77. So potential dog of the day play there. But that'll do it for kind of our extended preview and look ahead to some of these top games over the next few days. Any last second comments on some college hoops before we head out, Kern?
No comments, really. I'm just excited. I'm glad we're finally starting to get into this thing. We saw a few good games the other night, and like as you kind of touched on, next week is when we start to really find out a lot about a lot of these teams with the tip-off tournaments coming. So looking forward to the next few weeks with some of these non-conference matchups.
Yep. All right. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Beef Up Front podcast, the college basketball show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk soon.